Herzlich willkommen, come back und zum zweiten Teil des heutigen Tages. Und ich freue mich jetzt insbesondere und absolut, dass ich eine weibliche Verstärkung mir holen durfte. Die zweite an einem Tag, unfassbar, wenn wir uns das auf Oktober nochmal zurückdenken, da hatten wir gar keine Frau dabei, da gab es richtig Shitstorm, dass ich keine Frau dabei hatte, aber wenn die so scheu sind, kann ich ja nichts dazu. Aber jetzt haben wir eine tapfere, ganz tolle Frau dabei, Martina Fröhlich, Senior Director Alliances, Appien, verantwortlich für die Partnerschaften, für strategische Partnerschaften in der Dachregion, also Deutschland, Schweiz und Österreich. Und ich gebe das Wort jetzt gleich weiter. Martina ist für Appien hier auch in die Bresche gesprungen und hat uns hier stark im Hintergrund geholfen, dass das alles funktioniert. Deswegen ist Appien auch einer unserer Hauptsponsoren. Vielen Dank nochmal, Martina, an dieser Stelle. Ohne dich wäre das hier anders gelaufen. Also, du hast das Wort. Vielen lieben Dank. Und Karsten, bitteschön, deine Bühne, eure Bühne.
Thank you, Tino. Thank you very much. So, as Tino said, I'm not just adding to the female force here and share some light, but also why is Appien sponsoring this whole event? Well, first of all, the Appien European headquarters is located in Zug. So for us, this is a local event. And secondly, we wanted to add and contribute something positive because we've seen a lot of businesses suffering last year very, very badly, but other businesses and companies have been thriving. And I'm not just talking about Amazon. So we've seen a lot of good progress, and overarching theme of the event is what has changed due to Corona, and is there is a positive side. And so we want to share 3 dimensions with you that we have seen as a software technology vendor. First, coming from a global leading consultancy company. Second, coming from a software technology provider. And third, coming from a Swiss local client. And so please share me in welcoming Karsten Hegel. He is partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers and leads the financial industry group in PwC Central Eastern Europe. And Karsten brings more than 20 years of consulting experience, all of them in large multi-scale transformation programs and a focus on operations and IT. And Karsten established 11 years ago a digital process automation center in Bratislava, leading lots of digital transformation programs. And Karsten will share with us today the insights of PwC from last year, some mega trends and some highlights. And Karsten, welcome.
Thank you, Martina. I hope I'm loud and clear. Let me share my screen. I think I do need the host rights in order to do this. Here they are, perfect. So let me just start the presentation. So I hope this is working now. Okay, voila, here we are. So yeah, again, thanks from my side to join this exciting event, even though it is virtual, but I think this is something that we became very much used to at this stage. Just adding on to what Martina said already, and I think this is the driver motivation for me also to be here. I am leading the center out of Bratislava, which is very much specialized on implementing digital automated services around process automation, RPA, artificial intelligence. In doing that, I think we are one of the unique businesses that have been experiencing quite some positive impacts actually from the current Corona crisis. And very interesting to see for us clearly how organizations are responding to the threat, to the opportunity, but also to this massive event that keeps us all busy. And what I would like to do over the next 20 minutes is I would like to share with you some of our observations we have made. And this is not coming from a survey that we have done. This is really coming from practical work experiences we're having with our clients. in day-to-day dealing with the challenges that are out there in the market at the moment. And I do like to zoom into 4 dimensions that I think are very interesting to see, where we do see quite a shift of thinking and also a matured way of looking at things. The first one clearly is driven by the situation we're in, the change that had to be done last year. We had lockdown, organizations had to move quickly from on-site work to home office. I think we heard also earlier today, universities, education system, all were impacted by this and still are. My kids are still working from home. I think many of us are experiencing this at the moment. And what this did is, and I think this is something quite interesting, remarkable surface, it really gave a different perspective of the speed of change and the ability to quickly move to a different situation. If I would have asked 2019 key business leaders how fast they would thought at that time they could change the working model, they probably would have answered in months. Now, what we have seen last year is that this happened overnight, maybe. I know a lot of organizations shifted into home office overnight, moved thousands of workspaces into home office, and to be also fair, did this quite successfully. So I think there's a different perspective in terms of speed of change that we see. And this is clearly connected to the second topic, which I think is not new and has been discussed in several forums, is the new ways of working. And that is something still to be seen, but we do see an impact clearly on the ways of working because we're already in this. And here I like to differentiate between the day-to-day operational work, so business as usual, and also the change dimension, meaning the project work. And what was quite also remarkable to see is that last year we did recognize that ongoing projects moved the same from on-site delivery towards a virtual delivery structure, and actually managed this also quite successfully, which I found very interesting to see how adaptable actually structures are. And I will explore this a bit more detail where we've seen actually better adaptation and less better adaptation. The third dimension, which is not new per se, but I think again, because of the changes that I just mentioned, the second 2 bullets, it gives a different perspective of inefficiency, maybe driven also by the economic impact that organizations are facing. And I think we've been reading almost on a daily basis, how certain industries are being impacted, how employee reduction programs are being discussed. I think Airbus made and in the airport industry, there were a lot of announcements. Bank have announced also that they cut their headcount in head offices. So there will be a different perception clearly also on the level of efficiency gains and how to actually drive this topic. And the last dimension, which I found very interesting now, is the discussion, I call this here tools versus solutions. Also a bit driven, to be honest, by the consulting industry. I think there are a lot of sort of tools that are in the market, tools that are solving sort of isolated problems. But looking forward, I think this is not really what organizations probably will need. They need more complex solving of solutions, which are driven by the need of the first points here, that they really have to adapt to a new norm, however this will look like, but also with a better understanding of what digital really means, digital transformation. So I think there are quite some lessons learned that we have seen, which turned into certain trends. Let me go a little bit into details in some of these dimensions and what we're seeing, and also what opportunities are coming out of this one. So in terms of the speed of change, I think here, as I mentioned, the change from current state towards this virtual way of working, that's something that organizations have gone through. And again, I think remarkable to see this was actually quite successful. Now, what it did in terms of the thought process of the leaders was that, there is a new awareness in terms of the ability of change. And it really, drove down, I think, some of the cultural barriers that we've seen before in terms of, will I be able to do this quickly? How also risk averse am I in order to drive the change, to look at more digital sort of capabilities, which I like to test in my organization. And also, how can my workforce adapt to this change, specifically when we look about digital interaction? And I think here was a massive lessons learned done, that teams all of a sudden were able to communicate via different channels. All the collaboration tools that are out in the market, they are now being used. People get used to it. And I'm on a daily basis interacting with a lot of different organizations and colleagues who've been jumping from one tool to the other, which already became sort of the normal, which is great to see. In all areas, in all segments of employers are starting to get used to this one. So I think here's a massive change forward. And based on the research that PwC has done at the end of last year, and you see this on the right side of the slide here, is that also most employees, at least at the end of last year, do feel quite comfortable in terms of performing their activities from home office. Some even also responded that they do see a healthier work-life balance. Because they can combine, work with sort of more private activities. But also to be said, I mean, this is not the whole story. I think we also do see the other side, that after some time, there's a certain fatigue that, we're experiencing now, and also giving granted to, families that have school kids at home where everybody is sort of now online. It also triggers some challenges. But from an organization point of view, I think we have seen quite positive trends in this area, which triggers another aspect, and this is my second point here on the slide, is the awareness, I think, and the urgency in organizations to reconsider the way of working and to reconsider also this whole topic of digitalization, however we describe this now and define this, has changed. And it starts with some basics that, when the home office started, infrastructure had to be put in place. I know there were some organizations that, were struggling with VPN connections at the beginning. They could not do online meeting conferences during the day because the bandwidth was just not enough. But these lessons learned, I think, have been taken. So that's clear. But if I look at further initiatives in terms of how to automate processes in the back office, in the middle office towards the clients, here we do see that there's a clear acceleration that happens in order to reprioritize change projects, change portfolios, and really focus more on the digital transformation elements. And this is my third point here, to make sure that actually the automation is driven forward in different scale. And that's clearly an accelerator. I think a lot of companies has also seen who are dealing in this space. If I look at just the amounts of RFPs that are coming out and also the interaction we see with a lot of innovation centers, this clearly got a spike here. And I think that's something that we probably will also see going forward. And this is mainly for me driven really by a different awareness of, changing, of understanding what digital really means, and the necessity that everybody has now really experienced, and also the doability. I think that's a very important part, because now it became real, and now organizations have learned they actually can do this. I think that gives a very good feeling of confidence to also then being ready, to focus on these change projects. The other dimension and trend that we do see, which might sound a bit logical here, because digitalization at the end is about simplifying. But I think, the old school or old thought of school was very much about looking at as-is processes that are there, which are very, complex or used to be very complex, and seeing, okay, how can I lift this process into, a new digital process? That this per se doesn't really work. I think there's now also a better awareness to understand this. So it really has to go deeper in terms of breaking down traditional processes, componentizing them, and then sort of really driving for straight-through processing, so simplification and understanding what are actually my exceptions, what is mass processing. And also interesting to see is that this process has reached now, I think, all segments of organizations. So if I look at the banking industry, for example, I think we've seen a lot in the retail space. Now also in the corporate world, we do see that digitalization is going down to the level of detail that we haven't had. And I think also the same we see in insurance companies, that underwriting, which is always seen as a piece of art, also has adopted the understanding of automation. So here we clearly see that this trend is going broader into the organization, into the different segments, and the expectation is that this will clearly also continue into the future. So with that, of course, we do have to look at the ways of working. I mean, this is something that will evolve, and I think the statement that it will be more relevant, I think per se is clear. How relevant? I think something to be seen, to be honest. But here I would like to distinguish between two parts. So one element is the let's say the business as usual, so the daily operations. And I think here a lot of discussions are taking place in terms of what it means from a labor law perspective. What are potential hybrid models? I think there's a lot being discussed there. the other part, which I found very relevant, and there is a speaker also tomorrow that refers on this one, is actually the project delivery part. So how do I actually change my delivery of projects if I go to a complete virtual way, and is this possible? And some of the lessons learned that we have seen, and we do believe that this will become sort of a trend, is actually that it is doable to an extent we even didn't believe before. So if I look at the delivery of a project from start to end, even we have experienced this, that it started with an ideation workshop. It then went really sort of into a design, which was completely done interactive on virtual interaction screens. Then it came into the build phase, where a piece of application was built and then deployed without Teams meeting, everyone sitting more or less in his home office. And in the, let's say, 2019 ages, probably we wouldn't have thought that this is really doable. We would have thought, nah, the business analysts have to sit together. But actually, we saw examples where that have proven it's also done differently. A distinction, though, to make is here that we have seen that organizations that have adopted already this more agile way of working found it much simpler to move into these type of patterns, because the agile methodology, take Scrum or whatever, already implies a certain governance which is necessary in order to have teams working very fluent together. So you have these daily stand-ups, for example, where the team is coming together on a regular basis. You have very well defined meeting or catch-up meetings or retrospective where you're going through lessons learned process. So the whole dynamic of working together, checking performance, is already pre-built into this methodology. And organizations who were already sort of going into this agile way found it much easier to apply to this way of working. So hence also here we do see that probably with this lessons learned, there is a broader acceptance also to consider moving really projects into this more agile way of delivering than traditional models. Now, if we look at if we talk about this virtual way of working, of course, it will also have impacts on operating models. I mean, we cannot just assume that we're taking just 1,000 people out of the office space, move them into home office, and everything will run as it was before. So we do believe that operating models will evolve. They will reflect the different way of interacting. We also do believe that organizations will consider, and this is where the first time I use the word efficiency, will sort of be looked at, how can I look at this actually a bit different? How can I perform work in a more effective way by leveraging my pool of employees that are not always present in the office? And also with that, I do build opportunities to faster connect to an ecosystem I might want to use, because I don't have everybody in my own building. I can actually easier connect to the broader community that I'm interacting with. And what we also have seen is that organizations who have started to go into a more open ecosystem, that they also use actually this effect now to accelerate some of the interactions. And I think this could become very interesting when we also see the interaction between business partners, but also organizations that look very much into innovation. And I think this is very applicable to this group here, where institutions that are in the education, research, development space, are linking them to organizations. And with having experienced now this more virtual way of interacting, I think there's clearly sort of a boost or a better understanding of how to form this and then manage by this more the virtual networks, not just from a strategic point of view, but also really down to an operational point of view, where then assets are being created. And that brings me to the third point on this slide here, which is the digital assets that we see become more and more relevant. And that also has to do now with software. I think what we do experience is that there is a trend and there is a demand to have faster software up and running and to have software much faster delivering value to a business problem. So local platform like Appians are clearly sort of the softwares that organizations are looking at. And you are creating quite quickly assets with this, also with this way of working that I just described, which means that the visibility of value add, of return on investment that I can generate quite quickly is increasing. So that means organizations are probably looking to build these digital assets in a faster way in order to really drive the efficiency of the organization. And this can have multiple facets. I mean, this can be sort of within an organization. This can be also assets that then are being shared. And because of the digital component of the asset, it's also easier and faster to share. So we do believe that's another driver of linking, communities, organizations much, much faster going forward. And that all of that actually comes to my fourth point here, which looks at the traditional transformation that we have seen. We believe this will probably not be enough. We believe that actually it will very much go beyond the traditional way of transformation. So we have a very structured plans on how you go through different transformation phases. We believe actually that transformation will be much more dynamic and will be much more result oriented. We could also say, when we talk about a customer view, more customer centric, but it will also drive a much more experience point of view, where the outcome of whatever transformation I'm driving is absolutely relevant. So I would like to understand at the beginning, what is really my outcome? What experience do I get actually from the from the result of the transformation, and how does that really then add value to my organization? I think that's applicable for the front end, so towards customer interaction, but also towards the internal organization, where I'm using assets that I'm building in order to improve my operation of the organization. Now, this brings me now to the topic of efficiency. And I think we can probably not deny that in the next couple of months, we will see a next wave of cost cutting, which is one way to consider maybe to drive efficiency. But to be honest, I think that's a very short view, because just by cutting costs, efficiency normally doesn't go up. It's not as easy as that. I think it's a bit more complex, but that exactly drives a different view of efficiency. So I think one of the views is that organizations that are now rapidly and more faster adapting to the digital and new way of working will probably also be faster in looking at new technologies, innovations in the space, for example, of artificial intelligence or very intelligent, automation, telematics, whatever. I mean, I think sort of this is, here still open, but the awareness, I think, clearly is there. Which then means if we look at, driving now efficiency, we're not anymore looking at incremental changes probably that we do. We're probably more looking for structural changes. So meaning not solving a small area of optimization, it's then more structural to really look at the end-to-end view of a certain either department, or really of a process that looks, from a product point of view down to how do I actually develop and how do I bring this product then to market. So here we do also believe that the entire development of the efficiency gains will be different and will go way beyond Lean Six Sigma and these methodologies that have been, I think, so been around for quite some time. I guess this time is sort of stretched now. So here now we're looking really of radically changing the way of thinking. And there are coming three dimensions normally together to do this. One is what I said, the experience. So what is the outcome? How do I as a user experience actually the outcome? Then there's the technology angle, which I do need to consider, because most of this will be supported by technology, the change, and the business dimension. And if I bring these dimensions together, then I probably sort of will be in a better position to structurally make a change, and then also have a sustainable change in the organization than just a small incremental part. And that is then also linked to my third point, which is around, okay, what is the effect actually that I have? And we believe that in the next month, there will be probably sort of a short-term action that has to take place. Again, it has been announced already in the press that some of the organizations are cutting costs and mainly also looking at FTE reduction. But I cannot just leave this. I do have then a delayed effect on the rest of my processes, and I have to go actually through the operating models. I do have to go through the ways of how I am pursuing the activities and tasks. I do have to look at my skill profile, and at the end also I do have to look at my technology. And that is something that I think is known and was always known, that technology is always part of a transformation. But the awareness and what it really means, I think this is changing now. And here we do see a trend also in the organizations, even organizationally, that IT is coming closer to the business. I mean, we see this already. I mentioned this in the way of agile interacting. So how companies are interacting with each other on project level. So I think agile already says you bring IT and business together. But also organizationally, we do see that actually the position of CIO and other roles that have been implemented in terms of chief digital officer, innovation officer, etc., they are coming closer together. And we do believe that this trend is evolving. And that's something that, I think we very much look forward to see how this then also accelerates, let's say, the transformation of organizations. The last dimension I would like to quickly touch on is this topic about tools and solutions. I think what we see in the market is lots of tools, and I think there will be even more coming. We have been asked very often by organizations, say, look, I see all these tools, but which one do I really need? And I think, the variety of tools obscure a little bit the overview that really exists. If I just take one example, I mean, if we look at KYC, which I think is also a topic that is very prominent, at least in the financial services world at the moment, here are many, many tools involved in a process. You have to do sanction screening, you have to do PEP screening, and there are different tools for this one. But the tool itself doesn't solve the business issue. It's more the orchestration of all these different tools and the management end-to-end on how you actually bring all these different tools into one solution that enables you to have a very interesting and very fluent onboarding of a customer, do all the checks with him in terms of the KYC regulations, and then really sort of have him as part of the organization. And the customer likes to have a nice experience. So this is where the experimental expert comes in, but the organizations would like to really have an end-to-end solution in order to orchestrate this. And that brings me back actually to a very interesting quote I remember from Steve Palmer many years back when he was asked actually, what is the trend in technology? And one of the quotes he said is that, well, we need to make sure that, we can glue technology together. And I think this glue technology, for me, I interpret this as orchestrating, the different capabilities I need that sit in different tools or different microservices or whatever we call this to one solution, and then really sort of use that solution to really solve a business problem in a broader area, and have this solution as part of my architecture that then combines, my business skills, my IT skills, and also is linked to my strategy, what I'm trying to achieve. And with that being actually, the structural change to the organization that I would need in order to be sustainable and really drive my efficiency going forward. And that will evolve definitely the connection of different methodologies, of tools in a landscape. So for me, the role, if I just break this down to roles, the architect, the enterprise architect will take a very vital role here to combine this and see actually, that this is working together. And it also will help, and that is my last one on this slide here, is to not just, automate one small area, because I think this is nice for the time being, but this is like herring for a process. I give a shot, it runs, but then the effect will go away after some time. I like to industrialize this more. I would like to have this really as a sustainable solution in my organization. So really industrializing this so it becomes, part of my organization and then also the change going forward. So to conclude, I think what we've seen last year clearly is a new art of the possible. I think a lot of business leaders, because of the event of COVID, has pushed them to the limit to do things differently, which opened up new possibilities, definitely sort of new areas to explore, also new areas of challenges. But I think, it has really shifted and accelerated the understanding of the change, the understanding also of the art of the possible, new confidence in terms of what organizations are actually able to do, and also explored, I think, new area of innovation. And I think that's a very interesting aspect to consider, that the innovation cycles, might even be accelerated based on, let's say, the impact that I think COVID has given. So the last question I would ask here is, what does it mean for the future? What are the lessons learned? I think this is something we cannot answer yet. I mean, there are two views. One is, we continue on the new way, which is hopefully sort of, leveraging the challenges and turn them into opportunities going forward, or fall back to the old ways of working once everybody is vaccinated, and actually sort of not making use of the momentum that we have at the moment. I mean, clearly, I think we're hoping for the new way that this is continued and hopefully even accelerated. And with that, we strongly believe that there will be quite a lot of opportunities, for the economy overall, but also for society going forward.
Karsten, strike on time and perfect pitch. Thank you very, very much for sharing that insight. I must admit some of the numbers strike me as a bit scary, because if it is perceived that 84% of the employees perform as effectively as before, I think we will not go back to former times. So let's wait and see, and we shall be happy to welcome next year to see if your prognosis has proven right. Thank you very much, Karsten.
Thank you.